In December 2019, Mikel Arteta was appointed head coach of Arsenal. At the time, he was considered a Pep Guardiola acolyte. An assistant to Guardiola at Manchester City since 2016, he was to be the heir apparent, raised to protect the traditions developed by Guardiola across a glittering career. 5 years on though, while Arteta has turned Arsenal into one of the best football teams in the world, he's done so via a perhaps unexpected route. This is the story of how and where Mikel Arteta deviated from Guardiola's tactical pathway. Guardiola isn't secretive about his tactical blueprint. "My dream is to shut our 11 opponents up in their area and prevent them from crossing the halfway line," he said. And this is the modern interpretation of attack being the best form of defence. Guardiola wants to defend, but with the ball. Because if you've got the ball, your opponent can't score. And what safer form of defending could there be than that? But this comes at a cost. By forcing the opponent into their own penalty box, Guardiola is working against the logic that most football managers follow. The received wisdom is create space when you have the ball and deny space when you don't. Guardiola is proposing the opposite. Prevent space in possession by forcing your opponent to defend compactly and leave yourself vulnerable to counters by allowing big spaces to open up behind you. However, it works. Despite the risk, Guardiola's teams have been able to control games in such a way that they score more goals than they concede, and as a result, win more games than they lose. So effective has this approach proved to be that it's dominated the tactical conversation over the last decade, and everyone expected Mikel Arteta to follow in these footsteps. Arsenal finished 8th in their first 2 seasons under Arteta. It was a bit underwhelming. There was an FA Cup win in 2020, but at the time it didn't feel as though it necessarily fit the bigger picture. But in hindsight, this was part of the process. First and foremost, Arteta wanted to make Arsenal better without the ball. When he arrived at the club, the defensive numbers were poor and threatening to get worse. The immediate task was to halt this decline. Only then could he start worrying about how to improve Arsenal with the ball and go on to challenge Guardiola at the top of the league. With this done, the 22-23 season was a watershed moment. Although the previous year had seen Arsenal take big steps forward, this was the season where they did that with the ball, and it led to the club becoming a permanent fixture at the top of the Premier League table. At that time, the allusions to Guardiola were inevitable. In the summer of 2022, Arteta signed Gabriel Jesus and Alexander Zinchenko from Manchester City, and he would later describe their impact at Arsenal as world-changing. With Zinchenko inverting from fullback and Jesus playing as a Guardiola-like 9, it seemed clear that Arteta was following in the footsteps of his mentor and building a team in his image. But then something changed. Despite topping the Premier League table for a record 248 days, Arsenal eventually ceded ground to Manchester City, and the disappointment was